Hello, my name is Joseph Highley, and happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Rather appropriate that we're discussing Marian devotions, and happy Lujan Day, as May 8th is her official day in Argentina. So I will be doing the Virgin of Lujan, and we'll just jump right into it. Her origins, she is one of the newer Marian devotions. Legend has it there were two Lujan statues. They were not Lujan statues at the time. They were made in Brazil, so Mary statues made in Brazil and requested by an Argentinian farmer to be sent. And so in May of 1630 they were sent and made it over by ship, and then they were transported on a cart. And as they were going outside of Buenos Aires by some miles, the cart inexplicably stopped, and the oxen would not move it. And so they tried switching the oxen, and they couldn't move it. They tried unloading the cart completely and couldn't move it. And finally discovered that if they removed one of the statues, the cart would continue. And so it was determined that the statue wanted to stay there in what was Lujan, at the time just a small little tiny village of no significance. So the statue was left, the other one made its journey complete, and the one statue was left, and a shrine was eventually built around it. It was actually the site of a battle in the colonial times of the Spanish that was marked simply by a tree, so it wasn't a particularly sacred site by any means, so the devotion did not start from that, nor was it an apparition. It does completely involve a single statue, and they eventually decided to build a basilica or cathedral for it, and that occurred in 1904, as we'll get to. It stayed a very small devotion for many years. It was influential in the independence movement at the end of the colonial period in the 1800s, but was not a particularly widespread devotion even then. And so, as you can see here from the picture, it's got the gold. They did give it the gold kind of updated outfit, I guess, or decorations with it as a means of preserving it in the early 1900s. And so they built a cathedral for it as it was starting to get a little bit larger. The cathedral began in 1904 and finished in 1910. The devotion was still rather small at that point, though. In 1930, Argentina underwent a lot of changes, though. With those changes, the cathedral did receive pontifical coronation and achieved the status of a basilica. And so with that, actually, during that time, we're going to go back a slide there, was the time that the military launched a coup on the liberal government. And so you have multiple things that are happening all at once there in Argentina. One, you have an overthrow of the government. Two, you have the pontifical coronation and acceptance of the shrine, and a multitude of other things that happen that we'll get into. It is a very popular pilgrimage site, the Virgin of Lujan site. Every year, millions of people make the trip to see the Virgin there contained in the basilica. And every year, and I would expect today, thousands make the 40-mile plus walk from Buenos Aires to the basilica on her day, May 8th. And many reportedly actually finish the journey crawling on their hands and knees. And as we'll discuss here in just a minute, the diversity of those people that take part in that is great. So that brings us into the recognition part and the different groups that recognize her and take part in these pilgrimages and take part in raising her up. First, she is revered probably most by the military. She is the official patroness of the army, although she gets visits from all of the branches of the military. Particularly, there was several stories about pilots that had been saved that made visits to her and pilgrimages to her upon being saved. And so she was used during the military takeover and the military governments continue to use her influence to unite the country. And she's also been just a basic symbol of the Argentina government in a way that I don't think has been the case with some of the other devotions. I know that all of the other devotions typically get used on a nationalistic sense, but really, the Lady of Lujan stands out so strongly for that. And one of the uh, things that comes to my mind in terms of how I saw her being used was, like, if you look at America and you look at like our national symbols, like the bald eagle, the American flag, all these things that unite us so strongly. And I feel like she is used in that same way. If you look at her colors, even the white and the blue, the colors of the flag, she is very much a nationalistic symbol. I found it very interesting that some of the military groups that and the military governments that have been in control that use her actually use her despite the fact that they themselves frequently were not practicing Catholics, but still used her as the symbol. She is a couple other groups that I found interesting. She is especially revered amongst athletes. She's receiving special visits from the national soccer team, which won a world championship. PGA golfers, after they've won championships on the tour, have traveled all the way back to Argentina to visit her as to fulfill their promise to her. The national rugby teams, the local rugby teams, and as we'll see is a little bit of a theme, so many different competing groups will use the Lady of Lujan as their symbol and as their patroness. So you have two competing rugby teams, and the way I compare it would be as if she was the patroness to the Cubs and the Cardinals. It wouldn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, but that's basically what you have happening in Argentina with the devotion to her. Another one of the groups that there was a long article on from one of the official medical associations was that she is also considered the patroness of doctors in Argentina. Finally, and we'll go a little bit more into that national unity, possibly more than any other Marian devotion, she is used and has been successful at encouraging national unity. And so you have these very conflicting and unstable governments. One of the sources I looked at just dealt with all of the coups, instability, and the violence that has occurred from the Marian devotion. Or not from the Marian devotion, excuse me, in Argentina, in which the Marian devotion has been used in an attempt to heal that as that national symbol. So whenever you have the overthrow of the liberal government in the 1930s, you have a government that's looking for a national symbol to unite people, and that is when the devotion really took off into its popularity that it sees today as the national symbol. Then you have, of course, the Peronist movement. You have another military government. You have slow moves to democracy, but each group continues to use her. And I found that very interesting. For example, with Perón, you had him use the symbol of Mary, and Evita use the symbol of Mary. And of course, they went off kind of from that later in the end. But at the beginnings, there was pilgrimages by Evita to the Lady Lujan, and there was that relation there. One of the other interesting stories in terms of just the unity, or I guess even conflicting forces that try and use her as a unification, is that these military governments have been incredibly violent. And the more research I did on that, the more just horrific it was. One source said that one of the military coups involved killing 75,000 citizens, of people just disappearing. And so with all these people disappearing, a lot of them young men, you were left with a lot of mothers that were left without their children. And so in a protest, knowing that it was the government that got rid of their children, the mothers got together in a group, and they have this group to this day, even though they've been trying to be put down by the government, and they've made pilgrimages on the May 8th to Lujan to pray to her, and she is their patroness, and they pray for their children that they would come back, or that they would have justice. And it's interesting because they use the Lujan devotion, and they're opposing completely these governments that have done that, and the governments themselves are using the Lujan devotion and propping that up. And so you have these completely conflicting forces there, both using Lujan as their symbol and as their patroness. There is papal significance with the Lujan devotion. She was visited by Pope John Paul II. We've learned from Hall and others how Pope John Paul II had a very strong Marian devotion, and you can see him there with Lujan. And he presented her the Golden Rose, which is a particularly significant papal distinction that's given out, I think, just once a year, and is very significant, and that was given there to Lujan. She also holds a special significance for the current Pope, Pope Francis, as he is a native Argentinian, and he reportedly has a statue of Lujan on his desk at the Vatican. And so Lujan holds special significance to him. She probably more than any other of the Marian devotions is such a strong symbol of national unity and of nationalism, and that was something that I came across just repeatedly, and particularly Hall talked about that, is just the strong connection of Lujan to the Argentine people, to the Argentine government, to nationalism. One of the other final things I would leave with, they even have used her for border protection. There's been conflict with Argentina and Great Britain in the past over the Falkland Islands. And with the Falkland Islands, Argentina tried to take them back thinking they're theirs. Britain saying no, the islands are ours. And so that was a lot of the military action that inspired a lot of the military devotion to Lujan. And they also tried to use Lujan. They positioned her in strategic places around the borders, trying to keep from border incursions by enemies, and they also tried to plant her on the Falkland Islands. And there is still a Lujan statue there, and actually there was great controversy because it was defaced in an act of vandalism, and that simple act of vandalism caused national outrage across Argentina. Anyway, in conclusion, I hope you're able to learn a little bit more about the significance and impact of the Virgin of Lujan, what she means to the Argentina people, and what she means to Argentina and the devotion there. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the conclusion of the slideshow, not actually the conclusion of the presentation. I'm going to go through a few of my sources here real quick. That was something we were asked to do. The Zsolt Aradi, Shrines to Our Lady Around the World, was a very interesting book. It was in 1954, so it doesn't have a lot of her more recent uses, with especially the Falkland conflicts, but very good information about the development and taking it all the way through the 1930s when she really burst fully onto the scene nationwide. Have some sources from some pictures that I got. A lot of the sources is very difficult to research, I thought, and find just extra information on her, but just little tidbits from travel guides about the devotion. The cathedral is in a neo-Gothic structure or architecture, and just absolutely beautiful just looking at the pictures of it. And so the basilica is very significant. You have the Falklands vandalism that inspired such anger. You have talking about the athletic devotion there. Lots of really great information from our Hall textbook. That's where I really had to get a strong base from, just because the Hall book does contain so much good. Another one of the tourist guides. This one just kind of tells you about the basilica. It doesn't so much give, and there's a typo there, doesn't so much give background on the devotion itself, but talks a lot about the basilica. More photo news there. Dayton, University of Dayton, which I believe is a Catholic university, has a lot of really great information on Marian devotions, and so I was able to find multiple pages that talked about the Lujan devotions there, and gave just a really great background and her uses there. Had to translate a few Spanish articles. Those were probably my best research that I had, was those, Office of the Hispanic Ministry, and I'm about to run out of time, but those would be some of the ones, and then there's my other journalistic article from just talking about the military expansion and Argentina's government. Anyway, that's some of my research, and if you have any questions, shoot me an email. Thank you very much.